Last week, about 31 of student ministers and staff, we went on the student ministry servant leadership retreat. And one of my favorite activities was to share our faith journey. So we talk about how we experience God in our lives. In other words, how has God has been actively working in our lives. As I reflect upon my own faith journey, it became clear to me that God has often surprised me. I used to think that God only show up or works during my prayer on Sunday Mass. The rest of my weekdays, it's just like God was not there. So the reality is that God often works beyond my circles and expectations. Is that true? Is it true that God often works beyond our circles and expectations? Let me share with you 3 stories as we to illustrate and answer that question. Joshua, John, and Billy. Joshua, in today's first reading from the book of Numbers, Joshua told Moses, "Moses, my Lord, stop them. Stop Eldad and Medad prophesying in the camp." Now, why did Joshua want Moses to stop Eldad and Medad prophesy in the camp? Perhaps Joshua was jealous, as Moses described it, or perhaps Joshua expected the Spirit of God only works at a certain place and at a certain time. Remember, the story began right before this verse. The story began with Moses complaining to God about his people. His people kept complaining to Moses about the hardship on the journey. No water, no food. And then God provided water and food. Remember that story, right? So when they get a food manna, they complain, no meat. Oh my gosh, all of this day we just eat manna. So Moses was tired. So he finally complained to God, "God, why did you choose me to take care of my people? I am tired of their complaints." Does it sound familiar? When I talk with my sisters, I often hear their complaints about their kids. "I am tired of my kids. They try me not." So what did God do? So God told Moses, "I tell you what, I know that you're tired of people. Why don't you send me 70 elders to help you?" So Moses did. Moses selected about 70 elders. And God, the Spirit of God, descended upon them, all of them. But there's one thing happened. 2 of them, which is Eldad and Medad, was not in the same gathering, the same tent. 2 of them was outside. And yet, they still received the Spirit of God. And that surprised Joshua. And that probably surprised a lot of people. That's why Joshua told Moses, "Stop them." Moses, "No, we cannot stop them." Why? Because the Spirit of God operating descended upon them also, beyond our circles and beyond our expectations. Second story, John. In today's gospel, John told Jesus, "Master, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we try to prevent him." Why? Because he does not follow us. So why did John and his friend try to prevent someone driving out demons in Jesus' name? Because they do not follow us. So perhaps John expects God only works in his circle, which is a circle of 12. Remember that? 12 disciples with Jesus. We are insider, right? The rest of them, no. And Jesus explained to John, "No, do not prevent him. There's no one who performs a mighty deed in my name who can at the same time speak ill of me. For whoever is not against us is for us. Now Jesus wants John, and perhaps us too, to know that the Spirit of God works beyond our circles and expectations. Third story, Billy. A few months ago, on February 21st, 2018, our nation lost one of the greatest preachers named Billy Graham. He died at the age of 99. According to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, Billy held more than 400 crusades in 185 countries and territories across 6 continents, and reaching 215 million people. Imagine that, 215 million people. So how did Billy get to become the pastor of 12 presidents and become the nation's best-known Christian evangelist? How did Billy experience God? And how has the Spirit of God worked in his life? Now, Billy Graham was born in a family of Reformed Presbyterians, and his father insists on daily readings of the Bible. Now, Billy, as a little boy and teenagers, however, he was not interested or lukewarm about his faith. Now, he was more interested in reading history and playing baseball and dreaming to become a professional baseball player. So his worldliness, his father described, was mischievous and devilish. Now, at the age of 16, that's one event happened to him. He went to these revival sessions organized by Reverend Mordecai Ham. And Billy decided to walk up to Mr. Ham to make a decision for Christ. And years later, Billy Graham described his conversion this way, and I quote, "I cannot say that I felt anything spectacular on that night. I just felt very little emotion. I shed no tears. In fact, when I saw others had tears in their eyes, I felt like a hypocrite. And this disturbed me a little. I'm sure that I had a tremendous sense of conviction. The Lord did speak to me about certain things in my life, and I'm certain of that. But I cannot remember what they were," unquote. Now, returning home with a friend that night, Mr. Graham, or Reverend Graham, said, he thought, and I quote, "Now I have gotten saved. Now whatever I can do cannot unsave me. Even if I kill somebody, I cannot even be unsaved now," unquote. And moving forward, in 1997, he wrote in his autobiography, "Just As I Am," and he describing how he had felt God calling him to the ministry. The call came, he said, during the late night walk on a golf course. "I got down on my knees at the edge of some of the greens," he wrote. "Then I prostrate myself on the dewy turf." And he said, "Oh God," I sobbed, "if you want me to serve you, I will." And he continued and said, "All the surroundings stay the same. No sign in heaven, no voice from above. But in my spirit, I knew I had been called to the ministry. And I knew my answer was yes." And since then, because of his yes, God has done great things for him, in him, and through him. Let me just name 3 how God works in his life. 1, Billy knows how to communicate God's message in a very simple term and simple structures. And it's all come down to 2 points. 1, he basically told the people You sought happiness in wealth, in pleasure, in power, or other things. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? If not, I got something that can make you happy. That is Jesus Christ. Second, Billy knows how the power of the using media. New York Times described Billy as a master of communication. And I quote, Mr. Graham spread his influence across the country and around the world through the combination of religious conviction, commanding stage presence, and shrewd use of radio, television, and advanced communication technologies, unquote. In other words, Billy knows how to use the media to spread the good news. Third, Billy focused not just on himself, but on Jesus, and he relies on God's help. Now, when I watched Billy's funeral, there were so many people came up to share their experiences and memories of Billy. They all described in different ways, but all have one thing in common. Billy Graham focused on Jesus and relies on God's help. Now, on a personal note, as I read through his life and watched his funeral, I cannot help but was amazed how God works beyond my circles and expectations. Perhaps being a Catholic and being a priest, I subconsciously think or believe that God only works in my Catholic church. Now, Billy's story is another evidence to show that how God works beyond my circles and expectations. So the stories of Joshua in the first reading, John in the Gospel, Billy Graham that I just share with you, all show us that God is the God of surprise. And God works beyond our circles and expectations. So we are invited to reflect upon our faith journey this week, our experiences of God. So here's one question for you and me to reflect this week. How has God loved and worked in your life and my life?